Hello children, this is Grandma Carla, and we are reading more of Freddy and the Flying Saucer Plans. Today we're on chapter 11. In case he got the plans, Panofsky had made careful arrangements for his getaway some time before. Passing himself off as an artist named Smith, he had rented a house not far from the small farm where Freddy had taken refuge from the state trooper. The huge lawn sloped away gradually on all sides from the house, and there was a clear view for 100 yards in all directions. Not a tree or a bush stood anywhere within the high iron fence that surrounded it. There were 3 other men living there. One of them was the big, fierce man with curled up eyebrows. One always stayed with the house while the others were out spying. Panofsky knew that even if he got the plans, it was going to be hard to get them out of the country. Not only because the spies of the 17 other nations who were after them would be on his trail, but because the U.S. government would be watching all of the seaports and the airfields as soon as it was known that he had them. But the main thing was to get them and to keep them afterwards. Then he would wait until a good opportunity came to get away. He had plans for that too. The only thing he hadn't been able to plan for was how to get away from the jail unseen by the other spies. And he didn't. Cautious and quiet as he was, dozens of eyes, peering from behind trees and peeping through bushes, spotted him at once, and there was a general rush for the gate, which was the only exit from the grounds. With the plans actually there would probably have been a terrible free-for-all fight, in which indeed the plans might have been destroyed. Cy, saddled and bridled, was drowsing under a tree near Freddy's window, as Freddy had asked him to do. Realizing what had probably happened, and fearing that this man might not be able to escape, he trotted out. Panofsky ran to him, jumping into the saddle, and with a rattle of hooves they were through the gate, scattering the spies like a bunch of chickens and knocking 2 of them endways. And then they were galloping up the empty street while the spies ran for their cars. Once outside the town, Panofsky made cross-country for his horse, and the lights of the cars died away behind them. For his house. And the lights of the cars died away behind him. He kept on steadily for an hour, crossing several roads, even cantering for a mile or so along one stretch until pursuing car lights made them take to the fields again. When finally they came to the house, Panofsky pulled up in the gateway and I just dropped the whole thing. All right, so here we go again. I'm sorry about that. Didn't mean to drop you on the ground. Okay, hold on. Almost there. There we go. We'll start that paragraph again. Once outside the town, Panofsky made cross-country for his house, and the lights of the cars died away behind him. He kept on steadily for an hour, crossing several roads, even cantering for a mile or so along one stretch, until pursuing car lights made them take to the fields again. That when finally they came to the house, Panofsky pulled up in the gateway and gave a peculiar whistle. At once a searchlight on the porch was turned full on him. Cy blinked in the glare. Then the light went off and somebody called out something in a strange language. Panofsky dismounted, gave Cy a whack on the flank, and said, "Go home," and started up the drive. So Cy went back to the jail. In the morning, Freddy told the sheriff the whole story. "I don't think we ought to say anything about it, though," he said. "If they were the real plans, getting them back would be a cinch, because Cy knows where this spy is, and the state cops would besiege the house and make him surrender. But we don't want to get them back. They'd be given to Uncle Ben, and then the whole business would start over again, and the spies and everything." "Spies are mostly gone this morning," said the sheriff. "Mike threw a firecracker over the fence after breakfast and didn't flush one of them." "Sure, they saw the plumber escape. They're after him now, and that's fine. But look, Sheriff, that mosquito, I'm kind of worried about her. She did a fine patriotic act, and I haven't heard a peep out of her. Suppose she got hurt when the guy sneezed." "She may have been blown into a corner somewhere," said the sheriff. "Why don't we get the vacuum cleaner and see if we can pick her up?" but Freddy thought that might be dangerous. Suppose she's injured. I wish you'd help me look for her. She took a big risk, really, you know. If you or I had done that, they'd have given us the Congressional Medal. Well, said the sheriff dryly, I can't imagine doing it in the first place, and in the second, what would she do with the medal? Hang it around her neck? However, I'll say this. If we find her, she'll get a free meal in this jail anytime she asks for it, and no fly swatters. It isn't easy to find a mosquito in a large room when you want one. Not that you usually do. But the strange thing is that they did find Sybil. She had been blown by the sneeze under Penobsky's pillow, and then when they lifted it, there she was, lying on her side and moaning feebly. She had a broken wing. The sheriff got a matchbox and put cotton in it, and then they put the injured mosquito into it. They couldn't, of course, set the wing, but the sheriff looked it under a magnifying glass and said that he thought it would heal all right. He gave her some breakfast, and then leaving her resting comfortably, went down to his office. What I'd like to do, Sheriff, said Freddy, is get away for a while, until Uncle Bill has his engine made and can clear my good name. How'd this be? Jinx and I have been planning a riding trip, and we'll go. You give out that you're keeping me as the perpetrator of a dastardly crime against my country in solitary confinement in the dungeon under the jail. There isn't any dungeon, Freddy, said the sheriff. Goodness, you ought to know that I wouldn't have such a horrible place to stick my boys into. Well, and I won't be in it either, so that's all right, said the pig. Eh, said the sheriff. Oh, I get you. On bread and water? No, Freddy said. People could imagine me in a dungeon, but they couldn't imagine me living on bread and water. Not with my appetite. No, regular meals, but no light, except what filters through a tiny barred window high up in the damp and slimy walls. The sheriff shivered. Rats? He asked. Freddy thought a minute. No, he said, I think not. Snails. The sheriff shivered again. I feel terrible for you, Freddy, he said. So do I, replied the pig. We must both remember that I won't be there. Well, I'd better escape tonight, if it's all right with you. Some of the boys will be going to the movie tonight, said the sheriff. Better wait till after midnight. They go early, but some of them stay right through the second show, and then they go to get a soda afterwards. But they're usually in by 12. Freddy didn't say anything about all of this to Horace, the bumblebee, or to any of the other operatives of the ABI who came during the day to collect information or take back any messages he might have for his friends. The fewer animals or people that knew that he was no longer in the jail, the less trouble it would be for everybody. That night, back at the Bean Farm, the four mice, Eek and Quick and Eenie and Cousin Augustus, went to bed at 9 o'clock in their cigar box above the stove. And behind the stove, Jinx curled up on his red cushion. But nobody slept well, for Cousin Augustus tossed and turned and disturbed the other mice, who squeaked their protest, and then, from muttering, Cousin Augustus began talking so that what he said could be understood. The mouse's voice wasn't loud enough to keep Jinx awake, but what annoyed the cat was the things that Cousin Augustus said. He was calling some cat all the insulting names he could think of. Jinx knew quite well that the insults weren't meant for him. He was on the best of terms with all the mice. He just didn't like to hear any cat, even imaginary one, called names by a mouse. To sit quietly and listen to it was, in his opinion, not dignified. He got up and he went over to the cigar box with the intention of lifting Cousin Augustus out and giving him a good shaking. But in the dim light from the kerosene lamp, which Mrs. Bean always left turned down on the kitchen table, the four mice looked so innocent and helpless, all lying spoon fashion in the box with Cousin Augustus in the forward position, eyes tight shut and whiskers twitching as he muttered his insults, that the cat grinned and got over being mad. He just carefully shut the lid of the box and went back to his cushion. The mice would be all right, he knew. The lid had holes in it, so that in the winter, if the kitchen fire went out, it could be closed down and they would be warm and could still breathe. Now, it was lucky for Jinx that he hadn't gone right back to sleep. He wouldn't have heard something that he did hear. It was very faint, hardly more than a whisper, in the still air of the kitchen. Trap, 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 trap. It was the marching song of the cannibal ants. Jinx was off his pillow in a bound, and he threw open the lid of the cigar box and shook the rearmost mouse by the shoulder. This, of course, shook all the mice, and they awoke immediately, all except for Cousin Augustus, who snapped his teeth and kicked out with all four legs, imagining, I suppose, that he was being attacked by his dream cat. "Wake up, boys, and scatter," said the ants. "Trouble coming, but it's aimed at me, not you. Better go into the parlor. It's the cannibal ants. They said they'd get me, and they're out to do it." He stopped and pointed to a thick black line that seemed to be drawn from the keyhole on the back door, up the wall, and halfway across the ceiling toward the stove. Another black line was creeping slowly forward across the floor. "Golly, Jinx, don't let those ants get you, or they'll eat you alive," said Quick and Eenie. They've divided. That gang is going to drop on you from above, and the others are going to attack from the floor. Come on, Jinx, let's get out of here. But the cat only grinned. "Stick around, mice," he said. "I'm going to give these boys a tonic. Liven 'em up a little." His gun belt was beside the cushion. In it were duplicates of the weapons that Freddy had given him, a cat pistol and a water pistol. He pulled the bottle out from under the cushion and filled the water pistol from it. A strong and sickly sweet smell of cheap perfume filled the air. The mice began to sneeze. "Get under the table, boys," Jinx said. "You ain't smelt anything yet." Ants haven't very good eyes. They learn about the world by smelling of things and touching them with their feelers. So the cannibals, as they massed together on the ceiling above the cushion, preparing to drop on Jinx, didn't see that he wasn't there. Nor did the column that was approaching across the floor realize that he was not in his accustomed place. So when he pointed the water pistol at the mob on the ceiling and squeezed the bulb, they were taken completely by surprise. The thin stream of perfume hit them and then traveled along the line of the march, across the ceiling and down the wall to the keyhole. And then he quickly reloaded from the bottle and sprayed the entire length of the column on the floor. The whole ant army was thrown into complete confusion. Most of the ants on the ceiling dropped to the floor and lay there kicking or trying to wash the terrible perfume off their faces with their forelegs. For if its effect on Panofsky had been so powerful, you can imagine what it would be on a creature as tiny as an ant. Jinx reloaded his pistol again, but the army was in no condition to carry on the attack. They spread out over the floor, kicking and sneezing. Many of them were scrambling towards the door. The cannibals were in full retreat, but Jinx knew the grim doggedness of ant nature. They would never give up. They would be back. If not tonight, then some other night. Eek came out from under the table, holding his paw with one nose and pointing this out. "What are you going to do, Jinx?" he asked. "You can't squash a whole army." "Certainly not," the cat snapped. "Not when I've already licked them. I've got an idea. You boys want to come with me over to the ant hill?" "What?" Eenie squeaked, and Cousin Augustus said, "What's the idea? You want us to be eaten alive?" "Look," said the cat, "every soldier in that hill came along on this expedition. They've never tackled anything as big as a cat before, and they'd be fools if they didn't bring the full strength of their army. I'll bet there isn't more than half a dozen soldiers left in the hill to guard the gate and look after the queen's safety. Okay, let's snatch the queen. What do you say?" He got up on the table where he could reach the doorknob, turned it, and opened the back door. "Yeah," shouted Quick. "Sure, cat. We're with you." Eek and Eenie chimed in. But Cousin Augustus said, "Well, I'm not going. Those cannibals, if one of them bites you and you cut his head off, he goes right on biting. One bit me once. I've still got the scar. Look at it, down at the end of my tail." You've shown it to us about 100 times, said Eenie and Quick. "Couldn't even see it with a microscope." Eek said angrily. It's mice like you, Gus, that give the whole mouse nation a reputation for being sissies. This army can't get back to the hill for at least half an hour, and we can get there in 5 minutes. Now you come along, and no more nonsense, or I'll put a scar on your tail that'll really show. So Cousin Augustus went along, but he grumbled a good deal. It was easy enough, as Jinx had thought. A swift attack with the cat's claws scattered the few guards, and then Jinx dug down to the queen's apartments a foot or so down. The moon gave enough light for animals to work by. Here, there were only laborers and nurses for the queen's children. The queen was big, much bigger than even the largest of her soldiers. Jinx scooped her out with a claw and then quick grabbed her and carried her back to the kitchen. And it was just as they were looking for a safe place to put her that Freddy walked in. That is the end of chapter 11, and they have captured the queen. And here is the patriotic mosquito that they had some help from in making the Mr. Panofsky wake up. And here is a picture of the cat waking up the mice and telling them to scatter. Wake up, boys, and scatter, says the cat, because the cannibal ants were coming to capture them or bite them. That is the end of chapter 11, and this is Grandma Carla, and I love you.